You were Secret Service, you were a police officer, you were in Blackwater, you've done a lot.
I ended up working in Afghanistan for almost 5 years. We got to some points where I felt we were doing really stupid stuff. You know, you're going to some warlord's house of Kabul, and as we roll up, the roads just go quiet and people disappear.
Looks like we have a K9 alert. We are in a Y-turn. We're in a Y-turn.
The American government was always trying to negotiate with different people. Sometimes that involved suitcases of money.
Have you ever come close to, I guess, death?
Minneapolis was complete chaos. The police had just walked away and gave it to the riots, the mob, and completely had abandoned that area. The blood gang members were the ones that were controlling this area. You'd have 14, 15-year-olds with assault rifles. The last day that I worked a riot, a car pulls up right up to us. A guy pulls up out of nowhere. He gets out of the car and he's going towards the trunk, and I can feel it. Like he's going for a gun. And I'm telling him, don't do it, don't open the trunk, you know, and he pulls out a gun. And right then I'm ready to shoot him.
You were there on 9/11. You and I crossed paths, and I wrote about that moment we were together.
There was probably 2 or 3 times that I thought about going into that building, and I didn't. You know, sometimes I feel like I didn't do enough. The only thing I was thinking was pray. Like, that's all you can do. Pray for these people.
We started as agents together. Do you remember when you started your EOD date, they call it?
July of 1999.
And I came on probably a year later. What was training like for you? I didn't realize you got hired right out of college, which is pretty rare.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I had worked all through college in a lot of different jobs, and, you know, when I actually got the phone call that I was hired, I was framing houses. I was, you know, had a tool belt on and literally nailing houses together. And I, you know, helped coach the wrestling team at the college.
You wrestled too, right?
Yeah. And so I don't think I would be as fresh out of college as other people. You know, I did have experience, but it was a different kind of experience. You know, I think when we first got to training, and they'd go around the room and every single class would do it. And you would have these people, you know, where are you from and who are you and stuff. And these people were so impressive, right? Like, I was CIA police. I was, you know, graduated from the Citadel, graduated from VMI. I was a Marine Corps captain. I was, you know, and it just went on and on. And I was, you know, really intimidated at first. And then, you know, I realized that I shouldn't have been intimidated, I guess is the way. And so I thought training was okay. I was honestly, you know, I want to sound conceited, but at times I was a little disappointed. Felt like some people should have been dropped that didn't get dropped.
Yeah.
And I felt some people have that tactical mindset, and some people are never going to get it. And so I saw that a few times, that I wish a couple people, they would have taken into consideration their mindset. It was full of a lot of impressive resumes.
And it's interesting because those are two almost different things. Like the resume and the mindset and how you're going to tactically respond are very different.
Yes.
What scenarios or what situations would you see people maybe not handle themselves well?
At training?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Do you remember?
Yeah, I do. And I don't know if I want to.
You don't have to
badmouth the service too much. I really feel like the Secret Service is a premier law enforcement agency. And I really do feel like many of the people there are excellent and qualified individuals. But there was, you know, they made exceptions to the rules at times that frustrated me. I remember one of them was you had to pat down a person and find a weapon. And, you know, they're told, well, if they miss it, you know, you fail. Well, we had an individual miss it several times, and they make exceptions, you know, and that just, that takes away from everybody there that is doing it right. I feel that's kind of you either have rules or you don't. And as we're going into law enforcement where we're to follow those rules no matter what, it felt like, you know, if you don't meet the mark, you don't meet the mark. And I would have held my privilege of being an agent closer if I knew that other people couldn't make it.
You know, you say that story. There was I remember when I went to training, I worked very hard on the physical fitness stuff and I wanted to get excellent. Remember there was categories. So I wanted excellent, not just women's, but in the
men's as well.
The men's. And I had to work harder at it. Remember at the end, like they make you do all they make you do the fitness test, which is the pull-ups, the running, all that back to back to back. I did it. And like, I remember even like I got up on the pull-up bar and I did excellent for men. I was like, no, I'm going to do that. And then there was another, and I can say this because I'm a woman. There was one other female in my group. There weren't a lot, but they made you do this stuff back to back to back. So that by the time you did pull-ups, you had already done your push-ups. So you're tired. You're not fresh. She wants to get excellent for women. But she didn't make that. And then later she went to the PT instructor and said, hey, I want another crack at the pull-ups. They gave it to her. And of course, all because the only thing you're doing now is pull-ups. You're not having to do the sit-ups, the push-ups, then the run later. She did the allotted that was excellent for women. And everybody caught wind of it. And even me, and I was very upset about it because I worked so hard to get that excellent in men. And I remember they give us a certification. I still have it for achieving excellent across all your things. I remember when we were graduating, guys got up when she got her excellent and like a couple of guys ripped theirs. And I was like, they're right. I don't know if it's because like they really pluck you and they invest like a lot, like thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars. But I had my own share of experiencing that,
Not to jump off of the course or whatever, but I got to go to training and selection, whatever it was, with Blackwater, go overseas to Afghanistan. And we did like a 30-day course selection, whatever it might be called. And we started out, we had 2 like 16 passenger vans or something like that. By the end, it was myself and one other guy in our van.
Out of how many?
It was 16 in our van originally. And so we lost 14 out of our van. The other van did much better.
What do they make you do? I want to know what that's like.
So it was just, it's kind of like taking like the Secret Service Academy and putting it down to 30 days. And then they expect a lot more out of you. There is no room for errors, and there's a lot of personality component to it as well. And so if you're not getting along with the other guys, you're not going. You're going over to a combat zone. You're going to have to work close, live with the guys. One of the things that I saw them do that I had never seen before, and I thought was such a good tool, was you had to pick the 12 guys you'd want on a team. Hopefully, this isn't the first week. This is, the second, third week in. You pick your guys on your, out of these people who you'd want on your team. And these are all super, super qualified guys. I mean, former Navy SEALs and Marine Recon and Army Rangers and, all the top different guys. And everybody is super well qualified. And so when it comes down to picking your team, you're picking the guys that you want to work with because everybody there has shown that they're capable. But then you want to pick who you feel you could work with best, who you want to sit in a car with for 12 hours. Like that's part of the job too. And so I think that was an excellent tool. I remember after doing that, they ended up removing a handful of guys that didn't make anybody's list. And I thought that was an excellent tool. And I think it really helps, when you're downrange, you really value your experience and the fact that you got to make it. I was very proud of that school and that I made it through.
That's interesting. I've never heard that. And I think that that's amazing. If you're looking at someone and you want to work with them, right? You want to sit with them in a van for that long or be in an environment like this. Like, what were the qualities you saw would get people cut?
Personality is a hard thing to explain.
I guess for you then, if you're these are things that I can't do. Yes, it's about performance, but it's like, do people want to be around you? That's
absolutely it. Everybody there by that time had done all the challenges, right? Had showed that they can shoot at any range. We had done everything that was asked. And so then it comes down to personality and who you want in your foxhole kind of thing. And some people are just easier to get along with.
And who did you not want in your foxhole?
Who would I not? Somebody.
Like, what kind of,
Somebody that's always trying to tell you how to do something, right? Somebody that's always persistent that their way is the best way, the only way. We were all coming from such diverse backgrounds as far as our training skills. Secret Service had a way to do stuff. The State Department, they were the overall arching people, and they certainly have ways they want to do stuff. And you've got these other guys that all have tons of different military backgrounds, and to be able to merge together and recognize that the way you're doing it is just fine. And as long as we get the mission done, that's the most important thing. I'm sure you've experienced this. A Marine will tell you how to hold a pistol, and it's different than we were taught in the Secret Service. Or a Navy SEAL will tell you how to put his, grip on a AR rifle. They're all different and they all work, but some guys are mental. And like if they see it done differently than they were trained, it kind of drives them up the wall. And so those are the people that probably shouldn't in the fight with you. It's just if little things like that are going to upset them, then open their own training school and train people to do stuff exactly the way they want to do it.
You think that's arrogance? What do you think that is?
I don't know. I mean, you and I saw that at Secret Service training, right? Some of those instructors, like, they would have no problem telling a guy that was a former Navy SEAL or a former whatever, could have won a marksmanship at the Olympics if you didn't do it the Secret Service way. And I think there's some things like that are good for continuity. But I think, we're in a different situation where, you got to get up and, they're not starting you from scratch. And so I don't know. They're just different personalities.
Very strong personalities,
Absolutely.
like in a sense. Like you have to have that strength. So you brought up Blackwater. I know very little about it. Sure. I want to be fully transparent. I know very little, and I actually did not prep because I wanted you to talk to me about it. I also know that there's controversy around it, but I know nothing of why and how. Like, could you tell me about Blackwater? Like, what is it? What did they do? And then I guess what happened? Because I don't think it's still around anymore, is it? It changed names, right?
Yeah, it changed names many times in a short period of time. And it eventually just got sold off. Blackwater started out as a company by Eric Prince. He was a former Navy SEAL. It started out as a company to support the U.S. government. It had a large, thousands of acres area that had ranges and all sorts of things that you could go out and train. And so that's kind of where it started. And then once the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts turned on, there was a real need for assistance from the military. And so I think some of the first contracts Blackwater did were just moving products around, and they had did all sorts of support, whether it's, getting vehicles from one place to another or moving items, things like that, that the government was happy to utilize a contractor for.
Like, why would you go to a contractor, just not use your own military personnel?
I don't know how to get into all the,
I don't know if you know.
Yeah, we look at it differently now, but like in World War II, the Tigers, they were all contractors. So the private military contractor or the contractor, the privateer, I mean, when we were first involved in conflict in the Revolutionary War, you hear privateers all the time. That's basically what it was, is you're using the Tigers in World War II. You were able to get older guys that were already pilots, and you're putting them in airplanes, and you're not training guys from the scratch. You have a need. The easiest, best way to get fixed is to use a contractor sometimes. Many of the jobs, the mess halls, the things like that, they'll use contractors for. Back in the day, that was a military private's job, was to be, shucking the potatoes in the back or something. And it's just more economical and cheaper to use contractors for some of that work. What Blackwater's work in this modern conflict was a lot of different jobs initially, but their biggest and most well-known contract was for the U.S. State Department, and that was called the WIPS contract, the Worldwide Protection Services or something like. I don't know if I might have that wrong, but it was WPS, WPPS, I don't know, PS2. But
everything's acronyms in government. You don't even know what they mean.
Yeah, and so anyway, it was a government contract provided by the State Department, and you're providing protection for dignitaries, the ambassador, people that would come visit Afghanistan or Iraq. Now, WIPS, or that high threat protection group, is in many other countries, and then there's other contractor companies doing that type of work. Blackwater's no longer around, but the mission, I ended up working in Afghanistan for almost 5 years, and our mission there is very similar to a Secret Service mission. You have a protectee, and you're taking that protectee to someplace. So you're going to have an advanced team. You're going to have motorcade routes. It's just a little bit more hostile of an environment. We covered the entire country of Afghanistan, so we would have what we were called flyaway missions.
What is that?
The advanced team would get on helicopters, and we normally try to do an advance 2 or 3 days ahead of time. And it's very difficult to do an advance there. Like many of our advances, in Secret Service, like a presidential advance, might have a week.
Yeah.
Some of these advances, especially if it was in a city that we already knew, it'd be a 2-hour advance. We'd show up and we'd be like, we're coming. If it's not okay, then we're not coming. And the government would typically, the Afghan government or whoever we were visiting there would normally value the visit of an American. They typically provided the funding.
Did you trust them though? Like, I just know from,
Yeah.
and I've never worked in Afghanistan, but I know sometimes even in the service, like you'd go to certain countries and there was a massive trust level. Did you trust them? Did you feel safe that they would, that you'd be okay?
With the administration changes that occurred, not just with the United States mission and policies and stuff, the Afghan missions also, and so being there for over 4 years is kind of interesting where, a typical State Department employee, they're going to do their 1 year, if that, in country and get out and not look back and hope that they don't have to go back anytime soon. And when you're there for 4 years, you really see change occur. And when we first got there as Americans, we were really respected and felt that anything we wanted, we would get. And so if we said, we don't want to see any other armed individuals in the area, then we'd get it. And over time, as that changed, we were given a lot less respect, and the Afghan government was given a lot more respect. Perhaps that's the right way to go, but it makes it much more dangerous and difficult when you have lots of armed people around. And it was very concerning. And then the work continued. We got to some points where I felt we were doing really stupid stuff. You're going to some warlord's house, like in a very, very bad part of Kabul. And you pull up on the road and, all the kids are out playing soccer and, running around. And as we roll up, the roads just go quiet and people disappear. And it just gives you this feeling of like, this is ridiculous. They would only let our detail leader and one advance guy into the venue.
Like who's going to a warlord's house and for what reason?
I don't want to get into all the politics of how things work in
The
the world.
10,000-foot view. I'm just trying to understand is it because you're trying to negotiate with them?
Yeah,
They're
absolutely. The American government was always trying to negotiate with different people. And sometimes that involved suitcases of money, of cash that are getting to these people. And so, I don't know what side these people are on. Hopefully they're going to be on our side when the meeting's done with. But there was a handful of meetings like that you're just really concerned about the entire mission, and so those were the ones that, and it became more and more frequent, those type of meetings as I was getting done, and less of the, going to the Ministry of Finance or going to the Supreme Court of Afghanistan. Like those felt very safe and kind of normal. And as we ended up doing more and more of these, visiting scary little neighborhoods in the middle of town, I became more concerned about the
Do you
world.
lose guys? Do you?
Yeah, Blackwater as a whole did lose guys. In Afghanistan, we were pretty fortunate. The time while I was there, we didn't lose anybody from a combat-related injury. Right when I had got there, just beforehand, we had one of our Suburbans was blown up, and they had kept that around for quite a while.
Were you in the Suburban?
No, I was not. No, it seemed to be lucky sometimes, but that happened, just before I got there, and they kept that Suburban around as a visual reminder of how serious things could be. And we had, several guys that, that were involved in IED attacks or skirmishes, things like that. But I was very fortunate that I never was involved in anything. But it was a pretty serious place, and a trip to the airport could be the most dangerous thing,
It's interesting you say this story because as you're saying this story, my husband didn't do anything like what you did, but he went and volunteered to go to Afghanistan, but he would typically stay on the compound and did some interviews. And at one point, somebody locked their keys out of their car in the middle of the city.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember if it was Kabul, what city. So they're like, hey, we need some volunteers to go. Of course, he raises his hand and he goes. And he goes to help this guy who locked his keys out of his car in a very dangerous area to help him get into his car and move him out. He calls me after the fact. He said, hey, I'm going to tell you something. I don't want you to get upset with me. This and this and this. So I hear this and I'm like, I said, listen, I said, I'm okay with you volunteering to save somebody else's life. Or if you're going to go out there and if something's going to happen, I'm okay. Let it mean something. Don't go out there if somebody forgot and locked their keys in the car. That's not why you volunteered to go out there. If somebody's like not smart enough, I'm like, to remember his keys, I'm like, you need to not be volunteering for stuff like that. Did you have like, I guess, what was the most dangerous scenario? Like of all the things, because you've done a lot, would that be like the most dangerous, like, I guess, what's the most dangerous scenario you've been in? Because you were Secret Service, you were a police officer, you were in Blackwater, you've done a lot. Do you think that would be your most dangerous? If you had a dangerous story, would it be from there?
So it's funny that you would think all of those stories like would come out of there, right?
Right.
But honestly, I feel like the most danger I've ever put myself into was guarding press, protecting press in the Minneapolis riots. And I think by far that was the most dangerous scenarios I've ever been involved in. Felt I had nobody there to help if things went bad. It really was.
Well, tell me about that, because you were working, doing security with K9 for media crews.
COVID was in full swing.
Yes.
And so pretty much our K9 work had ceased. So there wasn't much work with the dog to be had. And I got a call from former Secret Service buddies that we know. They're in the private sector and they were pretty desperate. Obviously, everybody knows what's going on in Minneapolis. It was
George Floyd.
Yeah, the George Floyd was going on and it was just chaos. And they said, we need some help. Can you get down there? And I said, sure, I'll be there in the morning. Tell me where to go and I'll be there in the morning and help this out. It must have been, 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And they were like, we need you now if you can do it. And so I loaded up my personal vehicle and drove down.
With a dog?
No, just by myself with the pistol. And there was a CNN news crew working the police precinct that had burned. And they had taken over a police precinct. And so as I get down there, I live about a little over an hour away. And as you start getting closer, you see like the kind of the chaos in the streets. Power is out on many of the intersections, and as you get closer, it's getting darker and darker, and then as I got right up there, then there's just uncontrollable fires at buildings surrounding the area, huge gatherings of people and cars burning in the street. Some of the dumbest stuff I felt I did, because it really was, I was there and I was responsible for 3 guys, an on-air talent, sound guy and a camera guy. And it's kind of my responsibility to keep 3 people safe, where typically Secret Service, you got better numbers, it's hopefully, depending on what country you're protecting, it might only be you, but normally you have, a couple people there to help you. And,
you were responsible to keep them safe and alive. Like, how did you do that?
I don't know.
You like literally, I'm trying to physically see it in my head from a tactical perspective.
Yeah, I just trying to constantly keep an eye on what was going on around us. And so it was really nerve-wracking to try to, big wide field of vision, trying to look at everything, all the threats that were coming on. There was nobody to call for backup. And that's where it felt the most concerning. Like, in Afghanistan, we might get in a firefight, but there's at least 2 of us, even as canine handlers, we always had at least 2 in our car, and we always tried to be part of a motorcade that had other cars, and we always had more ammo than we needed. We always had more, but this is out in the street and it's myself, and there's no police to call. Minneapolis was complete chaos. And so that was really concerning. And that kind of, eventually the police did show up. And
are you talking days later, or
no, on that day? So
why weren't they there? I'm just asking.
So they had abandoned the police precinct. They were no longer answering calls. They had forfeited that area. The police had just walked away and gave it to the riots, the mob, and completely had abandoned that area. Weren't taking calls. The fires were burning uncontrollable. There was no firefighters responding. Every once in a while, throughout the night, you'd see maybe a fire chief vehicle and a drive through and I guess try to assess the situation to see what buildings are on fire, and then just keep going. Try to not get consumed by the mob. The story for that night ended pretty funny with the National Guard and the police finally showing up around daybreak. By then, the crowds had really subsided, and the National Guard is putting out these warnings of like, you must evacuate the area by order of the police, on these loudspeakers. And you got hundreds of state police and corrections officers working to clear the area. And I was with our CNN news crew, and we push off to the side to witness this as it's sort of looks like a Revolutionary War front line of, soldiers marching on. It was these law enforcement officers and National Guard, this big line to try to take back this area. And so as the news crew, we want to capture this on film. And so we kind of back off down a side road in an effort to video this all. Well, at some point, the law enforcement officers are kind of going by, and then they do a flanking move and come around and encircle us, start arresting us. They started with the on-air talent at first and put us in cuffs and ended up, disarming me and taking my gun and baton and everything right there on the street, throwing me in the back of a paddy wagon. Unbelievable moment. And to have it end like that, where you don't think that's where the problem is going to come from, right? You don't expect that these are my buddies coming, and it wasn't my buddies. Ended up, grabbing us and taking us down. But it was a pretty amazing story. The CNN crew, the camera never went dark.
They filmed the whole thing?
Oh, yeah. And the last guy with the camera ended up setting it down and continued to film, and it never lost contact. And so it went in the van with us, and CNN's, just got on a split screen, the black camera, of the, and the noise.
Did your wife see this?
Oh, yeah, this is funny. So,
because I'm thinking about her watching CNN, losing.
Yeah, my daughter and my wife had stayed up all night watching, and I think my wife had eventually fallen asleep, and my daughter wakes her up and she's like, "Hey, Dad's on TV." And there we are getting arrested. It was, and apparently calls were being made, all because everybody on CNN is watching this live happen. And so that starts the chain of people calling, and, the on-air talent, his family knew people in high-end government. People are calling the governor's office. And so we ended up getting, transported to the county detention center. And this is county. This is different from the state who had placed us under arrest. And you could see like the commotion that we were causing as far as they didn't arrest like anybody else, like maybe one or two other people. Like,
why did they arrest you guys? Did they even say?
No. And anyway, they just eventually got us out of the van and didn't say sorry, just kind of escorted us out of the building. They gave me my pistol back and my IDs back. And they made sure they walked us all the way across the street. The very first start of that, the governor's press conference that morning was an apology to the CNN news crew, which hopefully I was part of. And so the governor apologized and said that shouldn't have happened. That was one of the things that happened out of that. And it was pretty amusing. And, I was back to work and try to get back to my vehicle that was somewhere in this cordoned off. Did
you find it?
I did get it.
Was it intact?
It was intact, and it was amazing. Like, it shouldn't have been. And again, it's one of these small blessings that you don't know how it works out sometimes. The news crew's van had flat tires, or they had a Suburban. My back trunk latch didn't even lock. And so like nothing was taken. Everything's good. And it was like there was an AutoZone that had been completely burned out. And there sits my car in the AutoZone parking lot all by itself.
I'm convinced you have guardian angels or something.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you've lived through so many things.
Yeah.
And you and I were in the Secret Service together in the New York field office. And I actually wrote about you in my book. I changed your name at the time. I changed everybody's name just out of respect for people. But I got the okay from you now to oust you. But I wrote about how, because you were in the New York field office, you were there on 9/11. You and I crossed paths, and I wrote about that moment we were together. And it was that moment we were standing by the West Side Highway. And I recall looking up, and that's when people started jumping from the towers. And I remember looking over at you and you were cut. Your arm was bleeding. And I remember first saying to you, Dan, are you okay? And you were just like, yeah. Like you literally like it just, you didn't even flinch. And I remember people were jumping and I looked to you because I respected you a lot. I still do, of course. And I looked to you and you were senior to me and I said, Dan, what do we do? And I remember people were jumping and you were like, what can we do? Mm. And I knew if you were saying it, like it was true because you're not that person to not do something. But that was actually the only moment I remember you. Can you walk me through that day? Because I don't know where you were, what you did, and I don't even know how we crossed paths in that moment. And then I lost you. Mm-hmm. You know, it was brief, but I remember standing side by side and, you know, and I also, this may sound strange, but I also felt very comforted standing by you because I knew I was with someone like solid. I mean, literally solid, but just solid as a person.
At least somebody you could hide behind.
Hide behind. Yeah. Oh, never. But you were there. Not everybody was there. No. Some people left, but can you walk me through that day? Because I just know you in that brief moment.
Sure. The corner of our building was VZ Street and West Side Highway, right? And so I'm coming down the West Side Highway, stopped at the light. I just found myself like crunched up under my steering wheel. Like there was a noise and I didn't know where it was. As I'm there, I look up and I can see like the hole in the building and debris starting to come out of the building. I'm still in my work vehicle. And so I was able to use a siren and pull all the way over to the right and put my vehicle on the side of the road there and just started grabbing stuff out of my car. And I didn't know a plane hit. I didn't know if it was a bombing or a plane or what had happened. I just knew noise. Started running into the building that had been hit, the Trade Center. These two ladies come running out of the building. And the one was just severely burned and they're asking for help. And I'm imagining that they were in an elevator or something. And I saw them and they asked for help. And I said, I don't have anything to help you with right now, but help's coming. And so that kind of kept me from going inside the building. And I realized that I assumed there was going to be lots and lots of injured people. And so instead of going into the building, I turned and went to our building. And I remembered we had FAT kits, which are first aid and trauma kits that had all the dressings and all the medical supplies in them. And so I run to our office, and as I'm running to the office, I see several agents that I knew, you know, that were friends of mine. And I said, hey, there's injured people. We got to grab some, I don't know, just medical equipment that we could grab. Went back down and started looking for those injured people that I saw, and they were no longer around. And, you know, started looking for other people that we could help. And then that's when I saw the very first jumper jump and landed in a planter not far from where we were. And I remember the sound of the body hitting and the just, I don't know, the ironic thing of seeing a human body land in a planter. It just seemed like just unreal. A supervisor ended up showing up to this group. He took my radio. He was in charge. And
he would not have made the cut at Blackwater.
He wouldn't have made my list. I think the group of us ended up moving across the street just to be safer. And that's where you and I were at. You and I were looking there at the building, and you'd said that to me. And the whole thing that I remember out of it, and I didn't say it to you, and I'm sure it's because you're working at a government, but the only thing I was thinking was pray. Like, that's all you can do. There was probably 2 or 3 times that I thought about going into that building, and I didn't. And I think, you know, sometimes I feel like I didn't do enough. But other times, an angel pulled us back. And so anyway, you and I are there, and it wasn't very long after that the buildings started to collapse. I ended up running up to a building that had a glass wall that was undercover, and had the baton and was able to break the glass, jump into the window, and got in there. And there was all the windows on the one side had already blown out, And it was just, you couldn't see anything. You could tell there's other people around. And off in the distance, an emergency light had turned on. So I kind of moved to that light. I don't know why, you don't know why you're doing any of this stuff at this point. I get to the water's edge, and the water's edge was much clearer, because the breeze off of the water was kind of holding the smoke back. And so got to there, and by this time I had come across one other agent. And so it was the two of us, and we're kind of walking along the water's edge, and they're running into a handful of other agents that hadn't been as close to the collapse, that had been at the high school. They kind of went looking for us, that knew we were down there or something.
One of them was Mike.
Was it?
Mike V. We'll leave him at Mike V.
And run into these guys, and, it's so good to see them, but you weren't there. And so then, I'm assuming that everybody I was with is gone, except the one agent, and so I just, there was a handful of us down there, and to think that everybody's gone was pretty depressing. And, as we're, leaving the area, you're seeing, firefighters just dumping their gear off and just quitting, like it appeared they're quitting, what I mean? Like you just see this frustration, this sense of gloom. And so as we're heading up to the high school is when the second building collapsed. And that was much more of the, like you see on TV where, you're running from the cloud. And it was, trying to chase us down, and stayed ahead of it for the most part, got probably a little of the debris or whatever, but not nearly as bad as before where we were in it. So that's, got my face cleaned up a little bit, and, just tried to recover a little bit. There was light on at the school. It must have had emergency lights and stuff. So things were a little better. Use the water was still running and stuff. Well, then like you start getting all these other, there's a natural gas thing that's going to blow, or, these other, there's just constant, like things are going to happen and explode. And so everybody ends up running out of that place. And it was myself and another agent, Mike. And I think him and I are thinking on a different thing. Like we're thinking we're going to war, and we need, and so he had a cell phone. I didn't own a cell phone at this time. Secret Service didn't give us one. And so I was trying to get a message to my wife that I was okay. And that was the first time I finally was able to call her. And at the time she was a teacher, teaching kindergarten in New Jersey. They had taken her out of her classroom, and she was just watching it on TV, the whole thing unfold. And so I was able to get a hold of her and tell her I was okay. And we continued to walk up the west side for quite a while. And we got to a pier that we got in a text, to go to this pier. But as we got to the pier, you were the first person that I saw, and the first person that I had seen in that group so I was sure you were dead. And so to see you come out at that pier, that was pretty amazing. There's very little communication from Secret Service after that point, and I don't know, I'm ready to
deploy.
Yeah.
Right?
Like,
where are my orders? Where are we going?
Give me something to do.
Where's the war? That's because that's what it felt like.
Yeah. So it felt very awkward to not be doing something. And so
it's interesting because when you told that part, there was one part where I had made a choice too, and I didn't know if I made the right choice or the wrong choice. But when we were there, and I remember these group of NYPD detectives in suits came, and they were in plain clothes, and they were huddled. They came over by me, and they're like, all right, we're going to go in the tower. We're going to do this. And they were laying their plan. And I was just like, all right. I was standing next to them, and I'm like, we're going to go. And there were a couple of other agents there. And as I started moving, and I looked over to a couple of our peers, and I said, aren't we going? And the guys were like, they didn't say no, but they were just like, they just kept setting up the triage. And, and I realized, I felt like, I was like, do I go with the detectives, or do I stay here with my colleagues? And I genuinely didn't know what to do. I wanted to go that way. This before the tower fell, any tower fell. But then I was like, well, these are my peers. I should stay with my peers. But I didn't want to go without my peers. So I chose not to go. And it always, I always look back on that. I'm like, did I do the right thing? Did I not do the right thing? In full disclosure, I don't even know these detectives are alive.
Yep.
Because when you see the NYPD guys who were killed, and I was NYPD before, when they take your photo, when you're a cadet, you're in uniform. So you've got your hat on. Like as a woman, I had to have my hair pulled back. My hair couldn't touch my collar. I was in my uniform. You wouldn't really know. So I couldn't recognize, even to this day, I wouldn't know. I don't know if they lived or not. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, like, should I have gone, and was that the right thing to do? Was it wrong for me to stay? And I have that moment where I get disappointed in myself a little bit, maybe that I chose wrong, that I didn't do enough. And I don't know. And it's so interesting, like the weirdest things you remember from that day. And actually there was parts that I don't remember very well. I tell you the most pissed I was that day, and was after the towers. They sent me to, I think it was Hamilton Hospital to get checked out. And I didn't want to go. I was like, I don't want to go. I'm fine. I wanted to go back. Mm-hmm. And they set up, and I think people were worried about contamination, because they were worried about, was there something in the planes that maybe spilled over some type of chemical agent. And so they make me go to this hospital, me and this other guy, Bill. I will leave him at Bill. Bill and I go to the hospital. They won't let us in the hospital. I already don't want to go. They set up these makeshift tents outside to do decon on us. Mm. And they're like, and they put me in there with a nurse, like stripped down. And then they bust out this hose, like a fire hose. And they're like, all right, we're going to wash you. And I'm sitting there naked in this thing, and I don't want to be here. And they turn this hose on, the most freezing water I've ever endured. And I'm sitting in there, and I'm like, what am I going through right now? Because I don't, and I remember they hosed me down because I had a lot of stuff on me because I wasn't able to find shelter. I ended up being outside when the whole thing happened. And they hosed me down. I'm pissed. I don't know what, I just like was irritated. It felt humiliating. I'm like, what a day, what a way to kind of like go through this day. Then they bring me in the hospital. They check me out. They're like, okay, you seem okay. I'm like, I know I'm okay. Yeah. And I remember like kind of not storming out, but leaving and grabbing Bill. I'm like, dude, this is ridiculous. Like, how are we going to get back? And Bill let me commandeer his car because he was in Jersey. The next morning I drove back. But I remember too, like feeling like, I don't know that night I was like, I don't know like what to do.
And again, not knowing what to do. Like, how can I help? Like you see the firefighters on the pile, trying to pull people out. And I felt like I needed to be there and do something, but I didn't know. I felt like there was very little direction on how or what to do or how to help. And so, never did find my car, but I don't know, must have been 3 or 4 months later, an agent that had been working the pile, either at Staten Island or wherever he was working, he handed me a bucket, a 5-gallon bucket, and it had my crumpled up license plates in it. It had pins that we would wear for protection pins.
Lapel pins.
The lapel pins. It had the lapel pins and a couple other little things in it.
It's so interesting you say that. I have, when we were at that triage setting up and helping people, remember, I don't remember if people were coming out and we were helping people. I remember when before the tower fell, like the fire was so hot, I was sweating. Now, I don't know if it was, no, I felt the fire. It wasn't just me. Like it felt hot, like I feel heat. And I took my blazer off because I was dressed in a suit because we were supposed to have that big briefing. Took my blazer off and I put it down. Well, anyways, the tower collapses. My blazer's gone. Do you know somebody found my blazer? And Matt, we'll call him Matt B. Matt found it, got hold of it, maybe a couple of months later. And he gives me this plastic packet and I'm looking at it. He's like, I have something of yours. And it's crusted and white. There's rips on it. I said, what is this? And he's like, it's your blazer. Like, my what? He's like, it's your jacket from Ground Zero. And I'm looking at him. I'm like, how did you know this was my jacket? He's like, well, first of all, he's like, look at the size. He's like, we found it where our stuff was. So we assumed, if it's going to be anybody's blazer, it's going to be Papadopoulos' because that's like they couldn't say Poumpouras. I took it home and I didn't want it. I put it away. And then my father found it and he put it on a hanger and then plastic wrap. And he hung it in his garage. And to this day, it still hangs there. From time to time, I look at it. don't know what to do with it. You know, it's just there, but it's in the plastic. I won't open it because that smell,
Yeah.
you know what I'm talking about, right? It's that smell. And every time, I don't have like anything, but anytime I drive by, there's two things that kind of maybe, you know, I don't have any issues, but the smell of like certain fire, like will remind me of that. And then maybe like a loud clunking noise, like that dumpster style noise I'll have that. But I mean, other than that, I feel like I'm okay.
Yeah. I remember, and it was close to where we were standing when that second plane impacted. I remember the throttle of that plane sounded like it was, that one I could hear a plane, right? Like it sounded like he hit the gas and put it in, put it in overdrive or whatever. And I remember, so that sound, so like when planes take off, I hear that sound quite a bit. And I remember that, whenever I'm near a runway and hear that plane take off, that brings me right back. And again, I still didn't, it's so weird how that whole day, like I still didn't know exactly what had happened. Like if it was two planes, if it was, what had happened. And I don't know if you remember, I was going up the West Side Highway, like walking afterwards, there's like F-16s flying like really low down the Hudson River, doing low passes, and I'm like, did somebody steal an F-16 and are they shooting missiles at? Like, I didn't know if that's a friendly fighter pilot or not, and just a really weird.
It was. Everything you say is true. I think when you watch it now, and I don't watch it to be transparent, and I don't go to Ground Zero. I can go if I need to. Somebody was asking me the other day, have you gone up into I don't even know what it's called, the observatory of the Freedom Tower? And I'm like, no, if I need to, I can, but I just stay away from there. It just feels like a cemetery.
Yeah. I remember in our processing area where we would take fingerprints in the Seven World Trade, our processing area, we had a Bin Laden wanted poster.
Did we really?
Yeah.
I don't remember this.
Yeah. And it hung in that back room. We had.
Oh, was this after 9/11 or before?
No, before. Before we had a FBI most wanted poster. And I remember it. And I don't know, I'm a very visual learner, and I remember that, and it's so clear. And I remember the stats on him. He was like 6'4" to 6'6", and like 140 to 160 pounds. Like, how is that even like a person? Like, it sounds like a skeleton or something. Like, I just didn't. So that was why I think I remember it so clearly. It was some ridiculous stats like that. I'm like, is this possible? Can somebody really be 6'6" and 140 pounds or whatever?
Was he? I don't even know.
I don't know. He was tall and skinny. So I think that's where they got their information from.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
I don't know. But that was a weird, thing. And so if anybody has one of those posters, that would be amazing. I would like an OG Bin Laden poster.
An OG Bin Laden poster. I want to ask you a question, a personal question. Everything you've done, it's interesting. I listened to you speak. You did Blackwater. You went to Afghanistan, 9/11. You're always putting yourself in stuff. It's interesting because you brought it up with training. What do you think it is? Because not everybody is that way. And maybe some people want to be brave and they don't know how to be brave. Like you're and I'm not saying it to sound, I don't know how to say it, but you have a lot of courage. Like you're brave. You were given the life-saving award also from the U.S. Secret Service for 9/11 for your acts.
Yeah, so
your heroism.
Given the Medal of Valor from Secret Service for
the Valor Award
for 9/11, and then the life-saving award for a search warrant that I was on.
Those are two
different things.
Yes.
My first real interview was with the SAC of Minneapolis at the time, and his name was Dick Suakawa. Great guy, but he's trying to explain the job of a Secret Service agent to me. And at the time, I still lived in an apartment, and he said, "What I want you to do is I want you to dress in your best suit and tie. I want you to go stand in front of that door at your apartment for 12 hours, and then you have a good feel of what it's like to be a Secret Service agent." And you know what? He wasn't wrong. I can't tell you how many hours I've spent in stairwells and standing in front of doors. I can tell you, like, if a stairwell is pressurized from the second I walk in there and what the airflow is, and I can't, there was no cell phone to look at. So I'd just count ceiling tiles and, walk back little treads in the carpet, it was just, there's a lot of monotony.
I'm laughing because it's so true. You weren't on your phone. You actually weren't supposed to be on your phone because you had to be aware. And you would stand there it would be stand here. And I remember the first time I was given these assignments, I'm like, they must be joking. And they would stand here. Or the wildest one for me was Waco, Texas, Bush, midnights. Because if you were from New York, you always got midnights when we traveled. Nobody liked the New York field office. So we always knew wherever we went, we were going to get midnights. And it was like every New Year's when President Bush was president, I would work Waco. And it would be out in the middle of literally the ranch in the woods and just staring at like whatever was out there. I remember once there was like a shed nearby, and then the phone rings in the shed, and I went in there, pick it up, and they're like, I don't remember what it was, post 2. And I'm like, yes, sir. They're like, you might want to get inside. I said, why, sir? He's like, there's some wildcats out there, so just get inside. And I'm like, what's a wildcat? So I'm thinking about a cat that's wild. I'm from New York. I have no idea what a wildcat is. And I'm like, how big is this cat? He's like, they're big. I'm like, is it a cat? I mean, what are we talking about? And he's like, why don't you pull out your thermals and your night vision goggles to check? And they're like, I'm like, well, is it close by? They're like, look, it's a mama and her cub. And I'm like, you said cat, not cub. When I think cub, I think like a big cat. They're like, just go in and close the door. So I go in, I close the door, I pull out my night goggles, my night vision, and I look, and this thing was huge and had its little baby cub. And I was trapped there for hours. Nobody would come get me because they had to wait till the mama cub left. I could be relieved from duty. So nobody would come get me. I'm like, and I would ask them, like, can I shoot this? Am I allowed to shoot? They're like, don't engage the cat, Yeah. But I'm thinking, like, what if this thing comes at me?
You ever hear the story about the ninja moose?
What?
The ninja moose. No?
No.
So, did you ever do time out at Cheney's
yes,
house in
Jackson Hole?
Jackson Hole.
Many of cold winters,
we
like
did.
Outside in the snow.
Yeah. And so the story goes, one of the posts, they would have like a golf cart for you to sit in. And there was an agent sitting in the golf cart. And over the radio, they said, there's a moose on my post. And the other agents are like, okay, like it's Wyoming. There's moose, right? And the agent goes, no, there's a moose on my post. And they're like, well, use the bear spray. Like they had bear spray for us at the golf cart. The story was that can't. It's right here.
Sorry.
And apparently this person was sitting in a golf cart and perhaps fell asleep, and this moose sneaks up like a ninja and puts his nose on the agent's face and is right there while this agent's trying to talk on the radio and get advice on how to deal with this moose that had snuck out of nowhere and got right on the person's face. That's the story of the ninja moose. Yeah.
Oh my God, stop. I can't. There's so many stories like that. There's so many wild stories.
And they're all true.
They're all true.
That's the worst part.
They're all true. They're funny. I digress. We talked about post standing, but a lot of people don't realize that this Secret Service, you're a dual mission agency. So we did casework, a lot of casework. And so you were telling me your story about September 11th before, and I know you received the Medal of Valor Award, or the Valor Award is how it's called. The Life-Saving Award you received because of a search warrant. And I remember this search warrant. I had heard stories about it. Can you tell me, like, what happened on that day?
Counterfeit Division was putting together a search warrant, and this was a pretty high threat warrant. It was known Colombians, and the Colombians were suspected of counterfeit, and this group that they had been investigating had been known to be dealing in drugs as well. And so you put all those things together, and there's a pretty good chance there's going to be firearms involved. Well, we had two rams. We had a single-person ram, and then we had a two-person ram. Single-person ram went with the other group, and so I had the two-person ram, but it was just for me to carry. And so it's like 7 flights of stairs or something like that. And having this large two-person ram, it was at least 3 feet long, maybe more.
I remember it.
It was huge.
It was huge. It was massive.
This is a very low-budget apartment building with hallways that are like 24 inches wide. And there was no way to swing that ram back and hit this door, which was a big steel door. And so I'm trying to figure out how to swing this. And the only thing I could come up with was like almost lifting it above my head and like slamming it down onto the door. The door gets breached open. And then I go to the back of the stack of people getting ready to go in. As soon as the first two go in, I don't remember hearing the gunshots, but I smelled the powder of the shots. And I could smell that very distinctive powder where it's on. I think myself and maybe somebody else did too, like got on the radio and shots fired, came through the door, and there's somebody on the ground laying there. Our two agents had the guns. Everybody had their guns drawn, but they were still trained on the guy that was on the ground. There was another suspect in there, and he was like on a couch or whatever. The back room, it was very small, but like there was one more door that hadn't been cleared yet. But I look in and I see this, as I come in, see this pool of blood starting to pool, and again, this is like, these are seconds, happening. And you start seeing this pool of blood, just grabbing this guy's head and holding it and feeling the heat of the blood, just pouring out of his head. So as we're working on this, the other agents are like, where's the gun? Where's the gun? I'm just like, I'm just trying to work on this guy. And again, since it was probably the best executed warrant we had ever had, we had an agent downstairs. What had happened is when the guy got shot, the gun flew out the window and the agent downstairs had recovered it. And it was just an amazing, couple of moments there where you're like, did these guys shoot a guy without a gun? And it wasn't. And then the gun actually had its numbers filed off and stuff. And so we get this guy wrapped up, and we had paramedics there from the New York City Fire Department was there. And so, they're coming up right away. We had wrapped this guy up, and, I rolled him over to check for exit wounds of the chest because I assumed that's where all this blood was coming. And it was all coming straight out of the head. Wrapped it up the best we could. And by that time, the paramedics showed up with a board, and we put the guy on a board. And again, remember this hallway is like 24 inches wide. And so we're trying to get this guy on the board out through this hallway. And we get to the elevator. And again, the elevator is about as big as this hallway. And so we're trying to stand this guy up. And so, I grab him and I stand him up, and I'm like, hey, watch his feet. And they close and the doors are shutting on this guy's feet as we're trying to get the elevator moving. And it was, just the comedy comes in the oddest of times and places. And so anyway, we get him down and get him the paramedics then take him, and he survived. And
he did survive. He sued.
Yeah. Yep.
He sued. And it's two things. I know it might be weird for people, but when you're in these high stress situations, even for myself, you laugh at the oddest. It's not that you're insensitive. It's it's just sometimes the wildest stuff, and you're just you have to laugh it off, or they call it dark humor. Mm-hmm. There's actually a term for it. But you remember these oddest things, you remembering the feet on the door. What's also interesting, all this that just happened, you're right. This stuff happens within 2 to 3 minutes. Mm-hmm. And it's so fast and so quick. You ended up saving his life. Yeah, I
was involved in the other guy were helping just as well, yes. And so.
But you were the primary. You ended up pretty much saving his life, and of course our colleagues helped. But then after he healed, he got well, mm-hmm. and then he sued.
Yep.
And this went on for years. It went on for years because I remember and his argument was I don't know. He was arguing he didn't have a gun.
No, I think there were a violation of his civil rights. It was a federal case. And so I don't think it had to do with the gun. He definitely had the gun. And I think this was a third strike. He'd been arrested multiple times. He was here in the country illegally. And so he had everything going against him. And I think that was his, hope is, I'll just keep suing.
And that's what he did. And I remember one of the agents who actually took the shot. I was sitting with him many years later in the White House in what we call the down room. I was on the president's detail, and he was telling me about the case, and he was telling me about how it was still going on. And he was so upset about it. And I said, are you okay? He's like, this thing's going on for years. This guy's suing. He's dragged my name through the mud. And he's like, I did my job. And he's like, you know what? Never forget he said this. It's one of those moments where maybe I should have let him shoot me first, mm-hmm. because it was that much of an ordeal of what he had been through, emotionally, that agent going through these courts and what was being done to him. And I remember hearing this, thinking, wow, you must go through to have that moment where it's like, I should have just let him shoot me first. It would have been easier than me doing this. And I don't know if you had this. I had insurance. Did you have insurance?
It was one of those things that I think I took it out once and never renewed it.
I paid my insurance every year diligently. Yeah. I don't remember who the guy's name was when I got hired. He said, there's a couple of things he's like, that you need. And he's like, you need insurance. And I remember thinking, what? He's like, you need insurance. I'm like, insurance for what? He's like, in case you get sued. Yep. Like, sued for what? He's like, if you shoot someone. I'm like, but if I shoot someone, aren't I supposed to shoot them? Like, they're the bad guy. He's like, no, you don't understand. And that's when he showed me, he's like, you need to sign up for this. I paid my insurance every year diligently. Did he win? Do you know? Did you ever hear what happened with that? The outcome? Did that guy win?
That was dismissed.
That was dismissed.
Yep. But it took, I don't know, maybe years and years.
And 6, 7 years we're talking about.
And I was in Afghanistan, and somehow they got word to my wife, and I had no idea it was still going on. And I probably wouldn't have got clearance that I had with State Department if they had known I was being sued for that. You know what I mean? But I just forgot it. I wasn't purposely omitting anything, but I just wasn't top of mind. I was getting sued.
You did all these different things. And what I know, one of the, you have 5 kids.
Yes.
I have 1 and I'm tired, just so you know. You have 5. One of the things you've always told me and shared this with me is like, with your wife, like, she's really, and I know this too from being an agent, like how much of a rock somebody's spouse is to them. Like, that lifestyle is very hard. You need somebody steady. And like, she's been with you. Like, I'm thinking as you're telling me the story, I have her in the back of my head, like, Blackwater, Afghanistan, all these different things. If I ask her, if she was in the interview chair, like right now, like, what would she say?
I don't know what she would say, honestly. She is an incredible rock and a big reason that I've been able to do the things that I have. And it's a true life partner that you're truly dedicated to. And I think once you make that commitment, a marriage, it's almost 24 years now. And again, when I was getting hired with the Secret Service, one of the things that's over and over is law enforcement or high divorce rates.
Yes.
And for me, I was never going to allow a job to impact my family. So again, like in the Secret Service, when I got to a point where I felt it was impacting my ability to be happy and the ability to be fulfilled, then it starts to hurt your family and it starts to hurt your relationship with your wife. And that's where you start looking for outs. Like, you want to live that purpose-driven life where you're doing a job that has a purpose, that you're contributing, and that's what I felt. But at the same time, I'm not going to do that job surrender my family and my wife. And so by keeping that a North Star, the relationship with my family is more important. That's where I needed to go. And so always having that in mind has enabled us to do these different things.
What do you think that you've learned, that the most important thing that you've learned that you want your kids is to have? What quality? Like, if you had to say, like, what's the most important thing you would want them to know, what would that be? The
most important thing is love. But as a dad, one of the things I want to teach them, and I don't know if you remember years ago, a lot of the politicians were always like the evil 1%. And you hear this term 1%.
1%.
And I always thought of it as a different way, like a totally different 1%. And whatever you're doing, try to be the 1%. My kids are in athletics, wrestlers and football players. Try to be the 1%.
They have ears like yours, Dan? Because I know when I see ears like that.
Hey, mine are pretty good. I've had them drained a few times, so the cauliflower is not as bad. But my kids, they're much better looking and don't have cauliflower yet. But they try to teach them to be the 1% at what they're doing. On the football team, if they're on the wrestling team, if they're in school, I want them to be striving for that 1%. And you can always make that 1% smaller. When I wrestled, I got to be, I 1% in college. And then after that, you continue to try to get to be that 1% in the nation, in the world. And you have to have that plan. And I think by constantly challenging yourself and doing hard things, that's how you continue to be that 1%. And that's how I you know, it would be great to have a business that made me 1% money, but that's not my goal. My goal is to do the things that are putting me in a narrow field where that I'm that 1% in a certain area. And when I left the Secret Service, my goal was to be like the best dog handler I could be, and that the 1% of all dog handlers. Well, I think I kind of proved that by spending, almost 5 years in Afghanistan with a bomb dog. Like, I'm pretty sure I checked that one off. And so those are the things I want my kids to see is like, you know what, you don't have to go out there. You don't have to make the most money. You don't have to chase that. But whatever you're chasing, you chase it with all you got. And that's kind of the path that I want them to pursue.
You've been in so many different scenarios and situations. What's the most dangerous situation you've ever been in? Have you ever come close to, I guess, death?
No, I somehow, September 11th, we were both there. That was pretty.
That's true.
That's the big trump card. Iraq and Afghanistan, there it felt much more like a Russian roulette. Like, you're doing everything you can to protect yourself. And I developed little things again, because, I had a family at home and I'm trying to think of that. And I'm trying to take all the precautionary measures I can. And I think certainly much more than some of the other younger guys, maybe. And I'm trying to develop things in my mind where I can say, well, if I got hurt or if somebody else got hurt, because at any given day, like something could happen and I had no control over it. Again, we're in a Secret Service and my role there at Blackwater was a very defensive role. And so you don't, you're just waiting till something happens. And fortunately, I didn't have to deal with too much personally. There's close calls, there's things that scare you, things that come across. But honestly, working some of the riot stuff in Minneapolis there was by far the most dangerous. Personally felt like I was putting myself in the most danger. The last day that I worked a riot, had somebody interrupt us while our talent was just getting ready to go on air, Good Morning America, early in the morning, right in front of the George Floyd Memorial. And this was a spot they had done, several mornings in a row. And by this time, most of the press is gone. And the guy pulls up out of nowhere in his vehicle, which the Blood gang members were the ones that were controlling this area and had set up checkpoints. And so they were the ones that were protecting the area. And so I would arrive at like 4 a.m., 5 a.m. and start to try to negotiate with them to get in and to get my crew in. And you'd have 14, 15-year-olds with, assault rifles that are guarding this area. And I'd have to talk my way into, and I ended up getting the correct name, the leader of the Blood gang. And sometimes I'd say his name and they would, it'd be like parting the sea. Like everybody would be like, oh, yeah, come on in, And other times I think they were so low on the totem pole that they didn't even know who he was because he was the leader of the Blood gang.
This is a legit gang, like a regular
Bloods.
street. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. That would,
and they were controlling the area who had access to it.
Yeah. There was no law enforcement would enter that area around the George Floyd scene where that had taken place. And the city had just given it up to multi-block area. And, it lasted like that for a long time. The last day I was there, all the other news crews had left. And this is Good Morning America. It was already predetermined. This is our last shoot. We're going to do this in the morning and we're getting out. So I'm there in the morning with them and a car, because these Blood gang members have its multiple intersections blocked off. A car pulls up right up to us. Got his music turned super loud and just trying to, get his attention and talk to him and calm him down. He's still sitting in the car and it's starting to ruin the shot. We're 3 seconds from going on live or whatever, and so they end up having to cancel that. I'm still trying to deal with this guy again. It's myself. He gets out of the car and he's going towards the trunk and I can feel it. Like he's going for a gun. And I'm telling him, don't do it. Don't open the trunk. Let's talk this out, blah, blah, trying to, as he gets the trunk, he's got the trunk open. We're standing there And again, I'm not argumentative. I'm just trying to talk to him. But he's clearly high. It's early morning. I'm guessing he was up all night doing whatever he was doing. And he's completely mind blown. And he just needs to talk to people, and he needs to have them hear him, and just out of control. And he's a big guy, and he pulls out a gun. And right then I'm ready to shoot him. And somehow I see that he still has a trigger lock on it. And I don't know how, like, he had a trigger, like, who has a trigger lock on their gun? But he pulls it out of the bag. It's got the trigger lock on it. And I was so close to shooting him. And this is literally in front of the George Floyd Memorial when the city is just super high tension. And I think of that as one of the most dangerous times, because if that guy had the gun, if we would have gotten a shootout, it could have been worse things for the country at the time to have this kind of shootout at that location at that time. And so that was one of the times I feel like I was most, and I feel like that guardian angel was there.
Was the blood gang prevalent in Minnesota from before? Or did this happen? Did they show up after George Floyd?
My understanding was they were always there. As a Minnesota resident and going through Minneapolis frequently for work, and there's definitely some neighborhoods that are rougher neighborhoods, but I lived in San Diego as a junior high kid, and there was gangs, like clear gang. Everybody's had colors on, and I didn't see it in Minnesota that I was aware of. But what I was told was that George Floyd was a member of the gang, and he was a blood member, and he was not just a blood member, but he was one that had served time, and he was a senior member. He was sort of revered in the neighborhood. And again, these are all things that I didn't really, I've worked in law enforcement, but I never worked in the gang culture. And so you're standing in these areas and you're starting to see the movement of people, and I see all these gates open and let a Tahoe drive in. And it's not like a fancy Tahoe, not big rims, not tricked out, just a very nice, normal car. And this guy get out of there. And I'm like, who is this guy? Like, there's something special about him. And again, I'm trying to figure out how to operate in this area. And I went up and talked to him and introduced myself. And I said, hey, I'm here with these different news crews, and explained who they were and who they were. And I said, we're here to just try to get the story out. And he handed me his business card, and he's the president of a nonprofit organization that works out of Minneapolis. And I thought, this is great. But you could clearly see he was in charge. Yeah, he clearly is a distinguished member. And so I got to know him and try to develop a relationship there so it could get us in and out safely. They are a very solid, entrenched gang, and I had no idea that they were there. And I don't know if they've always been there or if it increased. Lots and lots of different groups. I don't know if they're necessarily gangs or would come pay their respects at the memorial. And, I don't know if they were if that brought in more of the gang members or not, but it was definitely occupied by the blood gang. And it was pretty intense scene to be around for the weeks that I was there.
You keep talking about the angel that you have on your shoulder. And, and I don't know if it's, you think it's intuition, it's instinct, it's faith. I guess, how do you guide yourself? Because you've been in a lot of close calls and situations. What do you think it is?
I'm a strong Christian, and I truly believe that is what's provided me protection. Yeah, it's hard to talk about faith and how much that impacts you, and how much being a Christian. I don't go to church every Sunday, but it's a personal relationship that has enabled me to do the things I've done and stay safe. My Christian faith has been with me my entire life. moved around a lot as a family, went to many different types of churches, from, Catholic to Baptist to Lutheran to, Assembly of God, like all these different styles of Christianity that I've been exposed to. I developed my own personal relationship, and I don't know that it's something that I developed as a young kid, and perhaps moving around constantly, it enabled me to reach deeper earlier. And I felt it throughout my life. It's an integral element of who I am and what's enabled me to pursue what I need to, what I feel like I should be doing.
You've been through a lot. So you went through September 11th. You've been to Iraq. You've been to Afghanistan. I'm actually always asked, and I didn't go to Iraq and I didn't go to Afghanistan myself, but with everything you've been exposed to, all these different things, like, have you ever, you always hear about PTSD. Is that something that you had to experience that at any point? Do you experience that?
I've got a few things about that. When people describe PTSD, I don't know if I understand it completely. And I don't know, I think it's such a mixture of feelings and events. And is there times, like I spent years in Afghanistan, if I'm driving down the road and I see a garbage bag on the road, like I'm swerving. Like it's just an innate thing so is that PTSD, or is that just an awareness that was built up over time?
I don't know.
And, I've had times where a ceiling fan is spinning and it feels like it's a helicopter blade or something, and so is that but again, I feel like having a strong faith really has prevented a lot of things. Again, I think wrestling, developing a different mindset throughout, in wrestling as a college athlete, my teammates, I felt like they were trying to kill me. I mean, I've been choked out, and once you I don't know, everything else in life is easy. That's a quote from Dan Gable, an Olympian. Once you've wrestled, everything else in life is easy. And I really feel that at times, because I feel that mentally prepared you for stuff that other people aren't prepared for. So I've done a lot of stupid, dangerous stuff. And I think with faith and prior experience, it's enabled me to do better. And what else is a key is most of those times I've had a dog by my side. And as we see now, dogs are great at helping veterans recover with PTSD. There's so many programs. We had the opportunity to train dogs for wounded warriors for a while. And so I've seen dogs make a huge impact. And I honestly feel like having a dog by my side for a lot of the things that I've done really has taken some of the stress away. But again, being involved in law enforcement still in some aspect, I'm completely private now, but you never know what contracts will come up in the future, what things might come up in the future that might have me holding a gun for a government agency again in the future. And I am very reluctant to say that I have PTSD, that I was exposed to anything that might cause PTSD, because that might impact my ability to carry a gun. And it might, as we see these red flag laws develop, that gives me great concern. At some point, if you've said you've had PTSD, does that mean that you'll no longer be allowed to be a gun carrier in any aspect?
Do they do that? I don't know.
So there's a big push right now for red flag laws, and that is a ability to take away guns from people that have become emotionally unstable. And it's not much of a stretch for PTSD to be classified in that. And so that's a great concern. And so I don't have PTSD. I've never had it. I'll never have PTSD. So just making that clear.
I hear you. But I think I get asked that question and I'm just kind of like, I hear a loud noise. I don't like it.
Yep.
I don't like the smell of something burning. I get that. I also in some way, and I have a master's in psychology. I guess I don't know what that is in a sense. And I'm saying it from a personal perspective.
Sure. I think every person's got a different journey and every person gets affected differently.
Yes.
I've never drank. I've never used drugs. I think that's a huge factor and a lot of the people that have the most extreme cases of PTSD, and they've been medicated and they've gone down a wrong road, and it doesn't help anything when
amplifies it.
Yeah, it doesn't help anything. And so having faith, having good training, I think all helps. The one time that I felt like I was the most exposed to kind of the PTSD effects so the military base that I work at was a big part of Operation Allies Welcome, or whatever, Operation Allies Welcome, where all the Afghans that were evacuated from Afghanistan after the withdrawal, they were brought to the U.S. And so at the base that I worked, we had over 12,000 Afghans brought to that base. And, we went from a small, sleepy base to having all these different Afghans there. And it was very difficult to, contain sort of the whole situation. And right away, they're bringing in fencing and T-walls. And so it's starting to look like Afghanistan, with the Jersey barriers or T-walls are basically the same thing. And I'm seeing these people that are Afghans, but I'm on my base. And it feels like, and I remember, I'm getting ready to drive a vehicle through a couple of Jersey barriers to go through it from one area to another area. And right as I'm getting ready to drive through there, a guy sets down a bag, and it is probably just a bag of trash. But right as I'm getting ready to drive through, and it just clicks back over to I'm in Afghanistan, and I'm getting ready to brace myself for the blast. And so that was definitely a weird situation. It was a weird situation, weird feelings to have in your home. You know what I mean? Like, that's a base that I work at regularly. It's a place that I feel like I would normally have a different tactical mindset. And so that really threw off my tactical mindset game. And again, I don't know if you would consider that a PTSD or just, this is awareness of it just
feels like training and awareness to me.
And it just a very different feeling that
scanning and awareness. I don't feel like that's that. What are your thoughts on that withdrawal? Because you spent all those years in Afghanistan.
Yeah,
did that impact you, that withdrawal?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd driven through those gates. That was our primary gate that we would drive protectees in and out of the airport. And we'd been through that gate many, many times.
They did the withdrawal where they were pulling everybody out.
So that's Kabul airport. And that was the civilian/military airport that we operated at. So if I'm going to fly home civilian, I'm on a plane. If I'm going to go on a State Department mission, be out of that airport, either on a helicopter or military C-130 or whatever it might be. And so been to that airport many, many, many times and knew the area very well. And just seeing the pure chaos, is devastating. And it truly felt like we were defeated, and we spent a lot of time there and we invested a lot. And not just the guys I worked with, but there was guys were injured and killed, and that embassy, that's what I think about is over the years, I was there for years. And again, we did this UXO mission of trying to, acres of doing mine sweeps. And the U.S. embassy there was this incredible structure, just, this incredible building built to the highest standards.
We built it. U.S. built it.
The U.S. built it.
Taxpayer money.
Yeah, the original. So we had actually, the United States had left our old embassy there during the Soviet invasion. We had lost an ambassador. That was, I think, one of the only ambassadors that we had assassinated. It was on those same grounds, and so that old embassy was there next to this new, modern, incredible facility, and it was an expansive facility, and it kept growing because it took over where that Camp Agers was the military base that was next to it. It had taken over that property. And just the investment of, I don't want to say just money, but it was money, time. We were, as Americans, we were there for years and years. And to just walk away, that was heartbreaking. We have, as Americans, have embassies in difficult places around the world. And I don't believe there's any reason we couldn't have held on to that embassy or held on to that airport there's no way like that could have been infiltrated. Like it could have been defended. For us to just walk away was really heartbreaking. And then to see the Afghan people, I mean, our interpreters, I don't know what happened to them. They were friends. As the K9 vehicle, we were always part of the advance team. So we'd have the two of us that were going to handle a dog. We'd be the driver and front passenger. Well, we had a back seat that was pretty much empty, and then the dogs behind them. And it was always the poor Afghan interpreter who didn't like dogs very much would have to sit in that back seat next to the dogs, and he'd have one eye on the dogs and the other on us, and he was just terrified. But those guys became our friends, and they're Afghans, and they continue to live there, and we got to know them well. Some of the guys that worked with us got married over time, and they had weddings, and we didn't go to the weddings, but we got to celebrate it with them in a way, and you really develop these deep friendships with these Afghans. I don't know what happened to them. I don't know. Did they survive? I would imagine, since they helped us, they were targeted, and that's terrible to feel that we walked out on not just those guys, but other, and we walked out on dogs. I don't know if you're familiar with that story as well. During the withdrawal, the U.S. military had some dogs. I believe there's just a handful that were actual U.S. military dogs. But again, there's lots of other working dogs that were there providing private security protection for U.S. government interests, right? So a lot like the job that I had with Blackwater back in the day. In the more modern era, there's dogs that are working at the airport. There's dogs working at the embassy, other places. And there was a large group of working dogs at the airport in Kabul. There was, there's I believe she's an American woman that runs the Kabul Animal Rescue. She might be the bravest or the dumbest human being on earth. I'm not sure. She seems incredibly brave, but not very aware of her own safety. She had been running a rescue in Afghanistan, taking care of dogs. And so she was trying to get the dogs out of Afghanistan. And she had arranged for a private charter flight to land in Afghanistan to transport those dogs out that were the dogs that she had been caring for as rescues. And what had happened is the other dogs, the working dogs, continue to get added to her list because she's got a plane coming for dogs. And she had cats as well. And the plane never got to come. She was pretty much being arrested by the Taliban, pretty much. And all the dogs that were on the runway ready to board this plane were all released, just let out of their crates and just told to go. And they just went. And so many of them were shot by the Taliban. Some over the years have turned up, and she has been, this lady has been able to continue the operation of the Kabul Animal Rescue. It's an organization you can go find. They're still, somehow she's been able to maintain a relationship with the government, and she is still in operation in Afghanistan. And she still comes across some of these working dogs that either somehow got out of the airport and survived, but she has taken care of them. And I think she's got like 400 dogs that she's caring for in Afghanistan right now. And her hope is to transport them to the US in the near future. And so she did I know they've done one trip from Kabul to Canada since that withdrawal, but just a mess. And so those are the things that I feel like we just abandon people. We abandon our dogs. And again, not my dogs, but these were dogs that contributed. And so just some horrible things on how that was handled, and not something that I would be, it was heartbreaking to see it go down like that.
It was hard. It broke my heart too. It's very sad, like to put that investment for that long of a time and then it's all gone. Like it's gone, everything, all that energy, all that time, it's just gone.
Yeah, and Taliban's back in control.
Yes.
And what's going to happen now? Oh, I don't know. But I have seen the way they treat women, and, especially we got to do these flyaway missions and go all across the country. And Kabul, you didn't have to necessarily have the head cover on. You certainly didn't have to have your face covered. Women, I saw them driving, and you see much more westernized. But as you get out, the women were covered. They couldn't even see their eyes, like they have got the full burqa that covers, and they're treated just terribly, and we had an incident, and I don't think our car hit her, but one of our motorcade in a small city, and this woman was injured on the side of the road, and one of our medics got out and attempted to assist, and before they would let an American get anywhere near this woman, a man grabbed her and drug her across the street, and it was a new road that they had been building and it had a really high center curb, and just smashed her head into the curb as he dragged her away, because that was better than letting somebody help her.
He killed her?
No, it didn't. I don't think it killed her, but it was just as he's dragging her arm and her body's laying on the road and dragging her across the road, and her head hit the curb, super hard. And you're just like, this is insane. This is not how you treat any human. We wouldn't do that to a prisoner of war. We wouldn't do that to a criminal. We wouldn't treat anybody like that. And I think that's a big judge of how we should look upon other governments. We should absolutely have disagreements and have differences of opinion on how you run your country and how you do things. But when it comes down to the very basics of how you treat a person, I think that's where we should have this separation. And, I go back to Iraq. I have another story where in Iraq, our job there at this American portion of the base, I used the explosive detection dogs to sweep individuals coming onto the base. And there we had a large Iraqi group of contractors. And I think that's, again, SOFA agreement is a status of forces agreement, which the U.S. State Department works out with the host country, and they decide on who's going to get jobs and all these things. And I think one of the big things was if you're going to be here on this SOFA, you have to hire locals. Yeah. And so we had a lot of Iraqis coming onto base. Well, in another area of Iraq at the time, they were bringing in small portions of explosives and then building the device on the base. And so that forced us they said, you know what, you guys are doing your explosive sweeps. Well, now you're going to start searching people. And so that became a whole new challenge of trying to take these dogs that were dual purpose dogs that search for explosives, but also bite people, and then find a way to start searching people with dogs. And we did it, and it ended up working out okay. We, utilized fencing and things like that, and we're pretty successful with it. But every day that I worked these pits of search pits where people would be siphoned through, I worked with a young Iraqi woman, and we had hired an Iraqi woman to pat down the other women as they came through and do a physical search on them. And she spoke pretty good English. We became friends. We talked a lot. She had a daughter the same age as my daughter. And so there was definitely some communication. It wasn't perfect communication because we're not the same, but I definitely became friends with her. And we had a few other women Iraqis that were more Western that worked on the base. But this lady I worked with every day, and we became friends. And the Iraqis, whatever terrorist, ISIL, I don't know, whoever these bad guys are, ended up kidnapping her, and they beat her, and somehow she survived. left her for dead in a ditch somewhere. And the whole reason that happened to her was because she worked for Americans. And, part of that is because she was my friend, and you take these things and you're like, how, it's really mind numbing to think about how you would do that to a person. She was raped, beaten, left for dead just because she was trying to, do her part. And she was a mother, and this was an opportunity for her to make money to take care of her family. I don't know her political leanings, whether she supported the American involvement, whether, you know what I mean? But she was there to earn a living for her family. And that's how she was treated for it. And so you see that and it changes you. And the good news of that story was I had a email address, and somehow we reconnected, and she was able to eventually get out, and she lives in Germany now and is, for the most part, living a decent life.
Now people come to you too from private sector.
Yep.
And do they come to you to train their dogs, or they come to you to use your dogs, or both?
Both. The biggest model that we do is we do a lot of searches for venues. So large concert venues, and there was bombings of concerts in England, as well as another location, I can't remember, out of the country. And it really started to wake up the concert industry and of what had happened and what things could look like. And so that really started us to use them for those type of venues. We've done several sports stadiums and worked for sporting teams over the years. And I think now almost all of them have regular canines at all these different venues. We work at casinos, anywhere there's large gatherings and a little bit of a threat. So typically if they start to have 10,000 people or more, that's a really good idea to start having a dog. Yeah. Yep. And so we'll do an initial pre-sweep, just like you would on a protective visit. But you can do a pre-sweep, and then typically we'll stand by throughout the event and continue to.
I mean, I just know like dogs, even the U.S. Secret Service, they played such a massive role. They were the first line of defense in the White House, or somebody's jumping the fence. We use them for everything. Like every event we went to, like always canine. Like canine was a staple. Like it's really, and I don't know if people know or think about that. Do you think the public knows, or private sector knows, like dogs like are one of the best lines of defense or protection?
Well, I think again, private industry is much different than government. Government has a different budget.
Yeah.
And so private industry, there's times that they realize that they should have dogs. And then there's times they realize they should have dogs, but they can't afford it. And so that's where we go in waves of our necessity, and it's really sad. And again, my background, I feel like you're going to do any protection, you need to do it right, because a terrorist is going to spot the holes very quickly. And if they do any sort of surveillance on their target, they're going to see what's happening and what's not. And if I was a terrorist, I would be looking to see if there was bomb sweeps taking place. I'd be looking to see what is happening. And I think by eliminating that, as budget restraints happen, and right now, I think our country has been put into a lull, believing that we're not susceptible to a terrorist attack. And I think, unfortunately, I think we are very susceptible to large-scale attacks, and not just. I keep envisioning. I think it was in Morocco at Casablanca. They had a terrorist attack. It was like 12 separate sites at the same time or within the same day. You look at London. I think their 7/7 attack. It was multiple trains at the same time. Like, we have not seen anything like that domestically in the United States. The last time we had any serious bombing threats was like the Weather Underground from the 1970s. So I feel like there is plenty of access, plenty of trained individuals that can make explosive devices, IEDs. And I think we are so fortunate that we have been able to prevent them. But I feel that it's coming. And I don't know when or how, but I feel like in the future, there's a likelihood of not just a single pipe bomb somewhere, but a multi-offensive, multi-faceted attack that could take place. And whether that's suicide bombings or, leaving an IED, I don't know, but I think it's coming. Look at past events around the world, and you see how terrorism has impacted and how terrorism has acted, and the tools that they use. And terrorists are very successful with explosive devices. And so I don't think it's a prophecy or anything other than intelligent training and looking at what's going on around the world and expecting that someday that's going to happen.
I appreciate you. Thank you for coming all the way from Minnesota out here.
That was great.
I hold you in such high regard, and I'm glad over the years, we've stayed connected, stayed in touch, and the Dogs for Defense. I follow you. I always watch your stuff and see all your, all the good that you're doing and everything you're doing out there. And it was an honor to work with you and know you and be with you, and just even to have you here. I appreciate you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And it's good to reconnect. There's, again, we're kind of joking about who would be on that list of people you'd want to go in a foxhole with. And although you're very small,
but I would take up less space
you
in
would
the
take up less
foxhole.
space. So yes, you're there. You're on the list.
I would be less.
Sure.
I could also do go into those crevices and do this stuff. I'd always get picked for the weirdest stuff too. Hey, Poumpouras, can you do this? I definitely would have picked up for undercover stuff. We didn't have a lot, but there'd always be something hey, can you go? And because nobody pegged me for an agent. And I kind of felt like it was a little bit my superpower, because I never felt afraid, because I was no one's going to peg me. But yeah, thank you.
I had the opposite effect. I always looked like a cop.
You definitely looked, but that's why you held the ram and the ballistic glass.
Yeah.
Secret Service are protecting people that other people want dead. Now, you think about these serial killers and serial rapists, people who go after kids, for heaven's sakes. There's something beyond wrong with these people. It's evil. You can claim that there's a way to rehabilitate those people. I hope so. I've not seen that. I've not experienced